Shea Dixon is here. He's with us every Friday. Good to get back on schedule with our guy.
Shea train.
It has been been all over the place. Shea's been traveling. Heisman, bowl game, recruiting. In fact, I think he's got a volunteer dog gig this morning that he's got to travel over to. So my man is busy in the mornings. It's good to talk to you as always, dog. Shea. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. You made me sound like a coach there until the dog thing at the end, and then back to a normal person.
I had to normalize you, Shea.
Philanthropy.
It has been a while. Speaking of coaches, I mean, it's been a wild 72 hours down here in Baton Rouge. What have you made of the official news that Cory Raymond is back in LSU wearing the colors?
I'm in the camp like Stewie, that this is big news. I mean, anyone who knows Cory and has been around him for a long time, Jordy, it would take us this entire episode to list off all the names of guys that were either highly recruited that he got and brought in or guys that he developed. I mean, look at the Jalen Mills and the even more recently Cordell Flotts or Jay Wards. Those are guys that he got to come through the program. And when he left, or I guess whenever he wasn't retained, remember, he was on the staff for 10 years straight. He was the longest tenured staff member. So he knows the expectations here. He knows what he's got on his hands in terms of cleaning up the DB room. But when you think, really step back and think about it, their two biggest worry spots were corner and D-line, and maybe specifically DT. Well, now your coaches at those two positions are two former players who have been around the block in Cory Raymond and Bo Davis, who know it better than anyone and certainly know what the expectations are and what the standard should be. And I've got full faith that they can go and get it done. So I don't know if I would have said, hey, look, if they're going to have a new D-line coach and a new DB coach, who would you think would be the home run hires 2 months ago? I'd say go out and get Cory Raymond and Bo Davis. How they pulled that off is impressive.
Very much so. Definitely want to talk to you about the recruiting, what that means for recruiting on the trail. How about the other guys that they landed and announced to the staff over the last day as well? And Jake Olson will be coaching the safeties, who comes over from Missouri, and then Kevin Peoples, who was on the Missouri staff as well, is going to be helping on the edge. How do they help on the field with development, and how do they help in the living room?
I think that the Olson news was interesting because people, now the more you dive into it, right, he's been coaching, this will be his 30th year, the more you talk to people, the more I have at least, it's the recruiting, it's the development. He is a guy who carries a pretty impressive resume of what he's done at different levels. Remember, he spent 4 or 5 years at Tulane. So, he knows Louisiana, and then you've got a guy who, next to him in Bo Davis, who's been and done it all. So I think you've got that kind of 1-2 punch is, I think, really, really big time. I don't think people are paying enough attention to the Peoples hire as one that is under the radar really good. And then Olson's an interesting one. He's not a household name fans, but in Louisiana, certainly. And then now he's beginning to cut his teeth with Blake Baker, who he's become kind of his right-hand man after a couple of years in Missouri. But this is a guy who spent time at Northwestern State, Nichols, Tulane, or no, not Tulane, ULM, and then was a year at LSU, or had time at LSU, and then came back here again. So he's got Louisiana roots. In fact, everybody right now on staff, Jordy, has coached in Louisiana in college and some in high school, but in college at least 2 years. So, and that person would be Cortez Aiken, the guy who's actually from here, New Orleans, and there's a handful of those. But you go up and down the staff, I think I have the numbers right here in front of me. It's 18 years in Louisiana. Cory Raymond, 16. Joe Sloan, 11 between LSU and La Tech. Jake Olson, 8 between those 4 schools I mentioned. Baker, 6 with LSU and La Tech. Bo Davis, 7, all of LSU. People, 6, Tulane and Northwestern State. Brad Davis, 5, LSU, and then started out at Southern Lab. And then Cortez, 2. So that's 8 coaches, 9 coaches right there who are all on-field coaches who have spent at least 2 seasons, some double-digit, in Louisiana. I have to think this is the most Louisiana experienced staff that LSU's maybe ever put together, when you have a potential, if you hire a tight ends coach who's coached in Louisiana, that all 10 of your on-field coaches have been Louisiana coaches before now. That's something that can really lock down the state.
Yeah, it is. And you can see the emphasis in the offseason was obviously to put Louisiana guys on staff. Shea, you have been on top of these coaching moves and doing a great job over at On3. You hearing anything on the offensive side of what may happen there?
I mean, I'd be very surprised. I've never heard one name come up for offensive coordinator. And at this point, when you wipe the slate completely clean on defense, and I get it, they finished in the 100s in defense. If they would have had a top 60 defense, this might have been a playoff team, a national championship contender, because of how great the offense was. It finished number 1 in the country. So if you're firing everyone on that side and then bringing in all new coaches, and Blake Baker's got to install his defense, and all of those things are happening, where do you find continuity? Well, I would think you'd find it on the other side of the ball, where you finished first in the country and you retained everybody except Denbrock, who, takes the same job at Notre Dame. Why wouldn't you just promote from within if you feel good about what Sloan and Hankton or whatever the combination is of co-offensive coordinator, or, Sloan is in the booth and Hankton on the sidelines. I don't know the exact route you go, but I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. And at this point, it seems like that's where things are certainly trending, is that the next play caller is already probably on staff here. And then you have one more on-field hire to go. I would think it's going to be tight ends coach. And then you kind of split up special teams duties. And I say that because I don't devalue special teams, but boy, in a Brian Kelly offense, tight end is a big deal. It wasn't to Jaden Daniels, because Jaden didn't have to use Mason Taylor this year. If he wanted 8 yards, he was just going to go run and get 8 yards. Like we saw in the bowl game, a guy like Nussmeier couldn't use Mason Taylor, and Mason Taylor had 80-something yards in the game. Then you think of Pimpton, and now you signed the number 1 tight end as Green, Mac Markway's on the team. Like, these are guys developed, so having an on-field coach makes sense. Everybody that when Brian Kelly got here, it was the O-line get better, tight end room's going to get better, and both have. So the 12 personnel, kind of the Brian Kelly philosophy of what he wants to do on offense, all of that took a little bit of a backseat, and you've got a generational player like Jaden who can just run around and do whatever he wants. But now that you're back into a groove of a guy like Nussmeier, who's going to be a pocket passer, I think tight end's a big position. So I would expect they'd hire a tight ends coach. We've heard Slade Nagel's name mentioned. He got an interview. He's been at Tulane the past, I think, 7 years, but is obviously a Lake Charles guy who's coached in a couple different spots in Louisiana, and is a pretty highly respected name in that regard. So still kind of a wait and see. I don't know if they announce anything today or what happens there, but I think with LSU announcing all the hires on defense on Thursday, that we're not far off from hearing, what's happening on offense.
Shea, want to get you a couple of names here, including a former 5-star quarterback at Alabama who just entered his name into the portal while we've been on the phone, which is pretty wild here. I want to get your thoughts on what happened in Bama. I know it's been a while since the news has kind of surfaced on Saban retiring and being replaced by Kalen DeBoer, but in your world, what was that news like, and what does it mean?
Oh man, I mean, that is it's been quite the what? How long has it even been? A week?
Last Wednesday. I think last Wednesday it was official.
Okay, so, I mean, a whirlwind stretch there, and yes, they got the hire done. It felt like forever, but relatively quickly. I think it was only 48 hours before DeBoer got announced as the head coach, but so much else was happening in that time. What's happened since, though, is, oh man, I don't even know how to describe it. It's a brutal blow for Alabama. Look, to lose the number of players that they have, and I don't know how much time these guys are given the staff, or they're just saying, hey, my position coach is gone, I'm out. A lot of these DBs, let's be real, go to Bama to play under Saban. Like, it's not shock that they're going to leave if Saban's not there, let alone Tre'Davious Robinson or whomever else might have been their position coach. So you're going to have some natural turnover at a time when you go from the greatest coach of all time to replacing an entire staff, where DeBoer did not, retain a lot of those guys. In fact, didn't retain the majority of them. And it's now bringing in new guys. And if they even meet with the new coach, or if they get a brief night with them where they talk, it seems like more often than not right now we're hearing that the decision is, okay, I'm entering the portal. And some of these aren't surprising. Now we're getting into the surprising ones. Like a Julian Sayin, I did not expect to be hitting the portal, especially with a guy like DeBoer, who between him and Grubb are known as two of the best offensive coaches out there. I mean, we saw what they did with Michael Penix at Washington. So the DBs, I got it. If nothing probably hurts more than losing a Caleb Downs, and certainly if he goes to Georgia, that stings Bama even more. But I figured those type of guys are going to, feel things out and, maybe bounce out and jump to another school that, is like a Georgia or whatever that they got recruited by. Now that we're getting into the quarterbacks, like a Julian Sayin, who was the number one quarterback in the country last year, at least in the eyes of many, that's big. That was the kind of guy you thought would stay because you've hired a Grubbs and DeVoe, like two guys who just had a guy like Penix playing quarterback. That news waking up to today, or I guess as you said, not right as we started the show, was I didn't see that one coming. I kind of figured the DBs would happen. I didn't think guys on offense would start dropping like this.
Jameer Grimsley is another name that is tied to Alabama, a commitment, a big-time cornerback that has since decommitted and seems like LSU is in play. This seems like the Cory Raymond effect. What have you heard on Grimsley?
Yeah, Cory had recruited him at Florida. In fact, whenever Cory and Billy Napier that said parted ways during the season, Grimsley was on his visit that weekend with Cory at Florida. So he hit the portal. This is a kid who is a track star. Bama and Florida battled hard for him. As I said, it was mid-season really, whenever kind of towards the latter part of the season when Cory and the UF side split ways, and then ultimately Grimsley decides to leave Florida and sign with Alabama, and he did that in December. So he enrolled, he was part of bowl practices, and now we look up 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks into January, and Grimsley said, all right, I'm entering the portal, I'm going to look around, I'm going to make a quick decision here and enroll in a new school for the spring semester. What does it mean for LSU? Well, suddenly he told Hayes Fawcett at On3, yeah, it's going to be Florida or LSU. Well, he's never visited LSU before. The reason he's saying LSU is because Cory Raymond's here, and Cory had recruited him to Florida. So the initial feel is that he probably goes to Florida, a school he's visited plenty of times. His family lives an hour and a half down the road. It's like going back home. I mean, this was a Louisiana kid, and he picked Bama and then hit the portal, and it was an LSU-Bama race the whole time. LSU would feel good about it, but in this scenario, having Cory here at least gives the Tigers some sort of foot in the door, kind of the door's cracked a little bit here. The key, though, would be getting him on a visit this weekend. And even as of this morning, when I was texting some people, it's not locked in just yet. So if they can get him to visit, they're in the race. If not, I wouldn't expect a kid like that to commit to LSU or sign with LSU and transfer in having never visited before. So that's the key right now. And look, you see how quickly it happens. I mean, Cory got offered the job, Tuesday night, Wednesday he's finalizing it, and by Thursday, kids are hitting the portal like this, where he's having to say, hey, look, let's get everybody on the phone and where are our numbers at and how do we go about getting them, and then toss in the reality that LSU's coaches are all out on the road right now. Like Cory will be out on the road recruiting too. So this mix of where things are with the calendar is just a lot to deal with, because boy, every day right now with this extended portal window where every head coach firing gives the school 30 days for an extended window, it just keeps overlapping into now your January recruiting efforts. And it just seems like every single day right now is some major news. And boy, is it not headlined by the reality of what you just said. You wake up and a Julian Sayin, the number one quarterback's in the portal at Bama already. He's been there 3 weeks, and that was the school he committed to over LSU and seemed pretty firm on. So, gosh, the ripple effects of this Saban decision just continue.
Wow, it is. It's amazing to see how the waves are still crashing from Saban making that decision last Wednesday. All right, Shea, some other guys here for you. A transfer portal possibility, Louisiana native, former Bama cornerback, and Trey Amos.
Yeah, he's on an Ole Miss visit, so that will be the thing to watch. And look, if Trey Amos doesn't come to LSU, that'd be twice that he's turned down the chance to come to LSU. So between picking Bama a year ago when he left UL out of the portal and chose Bama over LSU, and now if he does commit to Ole Miss or transfer to Ole Miss while LSU is actively trying to recruit him, that would be a second time. That just tells me he's not all that interested in playing for LSU. Now, can LSU get into the mix? Like him and Kyron Lacey are very close. They played together at UL, so he's trying to effort to convince him to say, hey, look, come make a visit again before you make a decision. Cory being from New Iberia and this being a kid who's from that area, obviously you say, okay, can he get LSU into the mix there? We'll see. I think it's just like with when you mentioned Jameer Grimsley, maybe not so much to the same extent because Amos is from here, he's visited before, but you want to get him on a visit this weekend, and that's what they're trying to do right now is, hey, go visit Ole Miss, but then come visit here. We'll see if Ole Miss can't get him locked in before he leaves campus, or does he allow things to play out a little further and come visit LSU, because there is no doubt, and this is what LSU fans want to see. Look, you hired your DB coaches, this week? I mean, in the past 24 or 48 hours. So it's a quick turnaround for them when guys hit the portal and want to decide within a couple of days on where they want to go, and might kind of have it in their mind ahead of time of this is where I want to go. But it might not be LSU, but LSU's trying to get in the mix and shake things up. The reality is, though, if he came here, he would compete, but would be a day one starter. And he's got a year left. But a day one starter at corner, a position that obviously they're trying to flip the room and really struggled at. And now they've made coaching changes to try to begin those efforts. But they are going after Trey Amos hard. I know they worked the phone lines on Amos and Grimsley all night last night. But are you able to get those kids on the campus in kind of this short notice? It's still TBD. I've yet to hear that either of them have definitively, firmly locked in an LSU visit.
Texas DB Terry Bussey. What's the latest on him?
He will be here. So he didn't have to get out of anything because, yes, he's still a high school kid committed to A&M, but he did not sign in December. So he's free to do anything he wants at this stage. He will visit Georgia in the coming weeks, and then right before signing day, do back-to-back visits to LSU and then A&M. And as I said, he's been committed to A&M since September. Obviously, they had a complete staff overhaul. That's why he didn't sign in December, because he said, hey, look, I want to see what the new staff in College Station looks like, what the new staff at some of these other schools looks like. And it was probably a good call for him because now LSU's looking very different. Georgia has jumped in the mix because T-Rob is now at Georgia instead of Bama. So they've sort of supplanted Bama as the third team. And then A&M obviously hired a completely new staff. And TJ Rushing, who recruited him previously, is no longer there. So I've always thought that Bussey was going to end up at A&M. The coaching stuff with Jimbo and a clean house being had there kind of shook things up, certainly. Was it enough? I think we'll see. I just think with this one, if you're an LSU fan, you approach it with, we've got a puncher's chance. He's coming to campus again. Let's see what happens. But I don't know if I would put him like Don McKinley, Gabe Relaford, for instance. I always thought Gabe Relaford would flip to LSU at some point. It would probably be closer to signing day. Well, he did. Dominic McKinley at the end, I always thought he's probably going to choose between schools that are close to home. He picks LSU and flips away from A&M. And 4 total times LSU has flipped an A&M commit this cycle. Those 2 guys, a 5-star offensive tackle in Weston Davis, and then a 4-star offensive lineman in Cohen Eccles. So can they do a 5th time? We'll see. That would be a guy Bussey. But again, I still am in the camp that if you made me pick right now, I would say he's going to go to A&M. And he has stuck to start. But he does make a couple of visits. And if he was so dead set on A&M, could have signed in December. And he didn't. So you know that at least you've got a shot here. And, hey, look, that's all you ask for at this point in the recruitment when you've already got 29 guys that you signed or have committed. You've already hit the portal for 6 guys. Now you're here at the end. Adding a guy like Bussey would be certainly laying yap, icing on the cake, however you want to put it. It's not going to end your program if you don't get him. But, boy, if you add him, that's a nice piece to push in the secondary as you try to rebuild that.
They are obviously working in building this class of 2025. Frank Wilson and Joe Sloan were on Calvary Baptist's campus yesterday up in Shreveport, meeting with a pair of 4-stars and James Simon, the running back, and offensive lineman Devin Harper. Shea, a little bit before we get you out of here, on this class of 25, that they've obviously got the number 1 players at the position of quarterback, wide receiver, and running back. But when you look at the potential and what could be next in this class, where do you settle?
Boy, what a start they are on. I mean, since we probably last talked, to move into the number 1 class, but to have the number one quarterback, to have the number one running back, to have the number one wide receiver, for them to all be 5 stars, that's not something that happens. Like, for LSU fans, it's never happened, right? And it feels great. It's not happening at Bama. That's not happening at Georgia. Nobody out there ever is falling into, or not falling into, just recruiting well enough to set up to where you have the number one player at those 3 positions committed at the same time. So that was a massive start. Getting Keelan Moses, who from even over the summer and last spring when we would talk, I said, look, Keelan Moses will be the cornerstone piece. Like, he's going to be the guy that helps keep it all together, that, I mean, just put everyone in the group chats, that in Louisiana knows everybody, and can really help kind of keep that, not the roller coaster, however you want to say it, but just keep it on the tracks and keep it running. And that's what he's done. He's been very vocal about it, as you guys know. So landing him was huge. And now I look forward, James Simon and Devin Harper, 2 guys you just mentioned up in North Louisiana. Those are major targets. Jabari Antoine, who out of Westgate, a school they're trying to turn things around at. Having Cory Raymond back was huge for him, he said. Obviously, both are New Iberia natives. Both played the DB position coming through New Iberia. And Cory obviously played at LSU. But this is a guy that Antoine holds him very hard as a coach. So I wouldn't be surprised if his timeline gets pushed up a little bit as LSU battles Texas for his commitment. And right now, I mean, those are the big names in state. You look outside the state, they'll be active in Texas. They'll go into Florida or Georgia or Bama or, some other, they'll go national with recruiting. Mississippi, border states, yes, and national to an extent, but they really want to make a kind of a big splash in Louisiana and say, hey, look, moving forward, we're locking things down here. And doing it, Harlan Berry, the number one player in the state, was that kind of first domino to drop and in terms of the top player, and we've seen others follow suit or beforehand commit. I love the direction they're going. I think they'll hold on to the number one class for a while. Will they go wire to wire with it? Kind of all this whole for a year? I don't know, but boy, what a start. Look, the fact that they've already got the Underwoods and the DeCorian Moores and the Berries and the Keelan Moses types committed is massive. I mean, those are guys that could have held out until the end to do something. Having them on board just helps build momentum so much. So there's no doubt that a Devin Harper or a James Simon, who's a top 10 running back nationally, or Antoine, is one of the top 3 corners in the country coming out of New Iberia. Those guys see that. And when they see other guys in, their grade and here in the state committing to LSU and not leaving, it becomes more and more of, okay, I am buying in. I do want to be part of that. Everybody else is staying in state. No reason for me to leave. We can compete for a championship here. And that's the type of mentality that got them the FAM class back in 2011 with Jarvis and Odell and all those guys. And some of their biggest classes was they got them on board early. Everyone became very good friends, and then nobody really flipped on them. I think that's kind of the direction we're headed right now.
Shea Dixon from the Bengal Tiger podcast and the Bengal Tiger site over